So the theme of today's video is really for you to think about things like cultural appropriation, the gaps of registration of intellectual property around the world, and recognition of local artisans' work and things that have been a culture or a tradition for hundreds of years or centuries in particular parts of around the world. Well, you all know by now my love of fashion, and here I am thinking about Prada's use of Kolhapuri chappals that it comes from Maharashtra, the state that I'm originally from, and we grew up wearing. And the fact that many foreign artisans or foreign designers have often used attributes of Indian cultural items like Kolhapuri and other prints like the traditional block prints, etc., that come from the eastern parts of India, etc., and haven't necessarily attributed all of those designs and all of those aspects to the artisans and India. For example, I mean, there was a big controversy around 𝗶𝗶𝗃𝗏 and Mexico some time ago because of the use of certain tribal aspects in her design that came from Mexico's tribes, and obviously then she had to give recognition to those tribes, etc. So what has India done? Because as you may remember, there was also basmati rice and other such products, yoga, etc., which have become universally understood and known products. Now, there's sometimes there's something called the geographical indicators or indications, or GI, and generally the government of India has given GI to Maharashtra and Gujarat for these Kolhapuri chappals. Now, let's talk about this, because there are many, as I've talked about in the past, international treaties that recognize intellectual property around the world and give recognition to registered trademarks, and countries have to honor these things between each other, and there are like many global agreements that have been signed in the WTO and the TRIPS agreement, etc., around the use of intellectual property. So what happens when a country's culture is appropriated in terms of a famous design house, etc.? How does that work? So the one thing that hasn't happened is that GIs haven't been registered. And as a result of that, the protection granted on the international sphere for things like, again, Kolhapuri chappals is fairly limited, which makes it quite easy for other fashion houses, etc., to perhaps use it and copy it. But the great thing about the internet, the great thing about sites like TikTok and Instagram and things like that, is many of these things come out to the fore quite quickly. And even our artisans in 𝗿𝗶𝗀𝗶𝗰 villages, etc., have now mobile phones, and they can see, and one can raise these things much more quickly than we could do before, where generally you wouldn't find out about an infringement, or you wouldn't find out about a use of a design in Paris or London or wherever until it was way too late and it had already created a fair amount of track record, etc. So it's quite an interesting debate. It's great to have products that have these elements in it, but should we be giving credit? Should we be sharing profit? Should we be looking at this in a much more inclusive sense and rewarding those that actually created some of these things? I feel fairly strongly about it. Let me know what you think and how you feel about it and what your experience has been. Thank you so much for watching Think Tank. I'm so grateful for all your support. I'll see you next week.